Could love truly triumph over money? Picture this, a man who seems to have everything. Billions in his bank account, a mansion that most people only see in movies, and a beautiful girlfriend who appears to love him deeply. But beneath all that wealth lies a gnawing question that keeps him awake at night. Does she really love him, or just his money? What you're about to witness isn't just another story about wealth and romance. This is a tale of deception that will challenge everything you thought you knew about love and loyalty. When a billionaire decides to risk it all by pretending to be completely broke, you won't believe what happens next. And trust me, the ending will leave you questioning everything you think you know about true love. Marcus Chen stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows of his penthouse suite, his reflection ghosting against the glittering cityscape below. The crystal tumbler in his hand caught the warm light of sunset, ice cubes clinking softly as he swirled the untouched whiskey. At 32, he had everything money could buy, and that was precisely what kept him awake at night. Sir, the guests are beginning to arrive. James, his most trusted confidant and head of household staff for the past decade, appeared silently at his shoulder. Miss Catherine is already downstairs. A slight smile tugged at Marcus's lips as he thought of Catherine, his girlfriend of 8 months. She had burst into his life like a fresh breeze through the stale air of high society. Her genuine laugh and unaffected manner, a stark contrast to the calculated gestures he'd grown accustomed to. But lately, a gnawing doubt had taken root in his mind. "Tell me something, James." Marcus turned from the window, studying his confidant's carefully neutral expression. "How can you ever be sure someone loves you for who you are, not what you have?" James's facade cracked, slightly concern flickering across his features. "Sir, Miss Catherine has shown no signs of—" "That's just it," Marcus cut in, setting down his untouched drink. "Shiz, perfect, too perfect, maybe." The sounds of the gathering party drifted up from below. Crystal glasses clinking, polite laughter, the subtle undercurrent of networking and social maneuvering that Marcus had grown to detest. Among the voices, he could pick out Victor Sterling's distinctive laugh. His supposed friend and business rival had been hovering particularly close to Catherine lately, his predatory interest barely concealed behind social nicety. Sometimes Marcus continued, straightening his tie with practiced precision. "I think I'd give it all up just to know for sure." James's reflection in the window stiffened. "Sir, if you're considering what I think you are." "A test." James Marcus turned his eyes bright with sudden certainty. "Not just for Catherine, for all of them, for myself." He strode to his desk, pulling out a leather portfolio. "I've been working on this for weeks. The Chen Foundation's new charitable initiative, transferring 90 of my personal wealth into an anonymous trust for global poverty relief." Mr. Chen, James's voice held a note of genuine alarm. "Now, this is extreme. Your position in the company will remain secure, but my lifestyle..." Marcus's voice took on an edge of excitement. "No more mansion, no more private jets, no more endless parties with people who only care about my net worth. Just a normal apartment, a regular job, a chance to see who stands by me when the money's gone." The party sound swelled as the door opened again. Marcus Catherine's voice floated in, warm and concerned. "Darling, everyone's asking for you. Are you all right?" Marcus met James's worried gaze, then straightened his shoulders. This moment, this decision, would change everything. The question was, would he find truth in the stripping away of his wealth? "It'll be right there." "Love," he called back, his voice steady despite the tremor in his hands. To James, he whispered, "It's time to find out what's real." As Marcus descended the sweeping staircase to his waiting guests, the weight of his decision pressed against his chest like a physical thing. Tonight, he would announce his financial ruin to the world. Tonight, he would begin to discover who would stand by Marcus Chen, the man, when Marcus Chen, billionaire, ceased to exist. And somewhere in the glittering crowd below, Catherine waited, unknowingly about to become the center of an experiment that would either destroy or validate everything they had built together. The grand ballroom of his penthouse sparkled with the carefully curated opulence that had defined his life until now. Crystal chandeliers cast rainbow prisms across the faces of Silicon Valley's elite. Tech moguls, venture capitalists, and social climbers, all wearing practiced smiles that didn't quite reach their eyes. Catherine stood near the center of the room, radiant in a midnight blue gown that she'd chosen herself rather than having a stylist select it, one of the countless small things that had made him fall for her. Victor Sterling materialized at his side before he could reach her Marcus old friend. Quite the gathering. Uwe assembled. His smile was sharp as a razor's edge, though I must say there are whispers about some rather concerning market movements from Chen Industries this week. Marcus met his gaze steadily. Actually, Victor, I'm glad you brought that up. I have an announcement to make. He moved to the slightly raised platform where a string quartet had been playing, gesturing for them to pause. The quiet that fell over the room was immediate, expectant. All eyes turned to him, including Catherine's, her expression soft with concern. He cleared his throat. I've gathered you all here tonight, not just for celebration, but for transparency. The crystal flute in his hand caught the light as he raised it. Many of you have been my friends, partners, and confidants through years of success. You've been there as Chen Industries grew from a startup in my garage to a global tech force tonight. Tonight, I need to be honest with you all. The silence in the room deepened. Catherine took a step toward him, but Victor's hand on her arm held her back. Marcus noticed the gesture, felt it like a knife twist, and pressed on. This morning, I signed papers transferring 90% of my personal wealth to an anonymous charitable trust for global poverty relief. Additionally, due to some unfortunate investment decisions, I've lost most of what remained. He paused, watching the ripple of shock move through the crowd. Chen Industries remains stable, but I personally am well, let's say I'll be making some significant lifestyle changes. The silence exploded into murmurs. He watched faces transform. Shock, disbelief, calculation, and in some cases, poorly concealed satisfaction. Victor's expression was particularly telling, a mix of surprise and predatory interest that made Marcus's skin crawl. Catherine stood frozen, her face pale but unreadable. When their eyes met across the room, he saw something flash in her expression. Confusion, hurt, perhaps betrayal? But before he could reach her, the crowd surged between them, a chaos of questions and concern. What does this mean for the company? How will this affect ongoing partnerships? Are you saying you're broke? Marcus held up his hands. Chen Industries remains strong. This is a personal decision, one that will affect my lifestyle, but not the company's operations. I'll be stepping back from some social obligations, moving to a more modest living situation. You can't be serious, Victor's voice cut through the chaos. This is a joke, right? Some kind of publicity stunt. No joke, Victor. Marcus met his rival's gaze steadily, just a man choosing a different path. The party dissolved into chaos after that. Marcus watched as groups formed and reformed, whispered conversations, and not so subtle pointing, creating a web of speculation around him. But his eyes kept returning to Catherine, who stood alone now near the windows, her face turned toward the city lights below. James appeared at his side, voice low. Sir, Miss Catherine hasn't left yet. Perhaps you should. No, Marcus cut him off, though everything in him ached to go to her. The test begins now. As the night wore on, Marcus observed the subtle shift in the room's dynamics. People who had been hanging on his every word an hour ago now found reasons to drift away. Business cards were exchanged with meaningful glances, no doubt planning how to profit from his apparent downfall. Through it all, Catherine remained, though she maintained a careful distance, her eyes finding him occasionally with an expression he couldn't quite read. By midnight, the crowd had thinned considerably. Those who remained were either too invested in the drama to leave or too drunk to drive. Victor hovered near Catherine, speaking to her in low tones that made Marcus's jaw clench. But she showed no interest in his obvious advances, instead gathering her wrap and moving toward the exit. The next morning arrived with brutal clarity. Marcus stood in his walk-in closet, soon to be former walk-in closet, methodically sorting through designer suits and watches worth more than what most people made in a year. James stood nearby, tablet in hand, cataloging items for donation. The movers will be here at noon, Sir James, said his voice carefully neutral. The apartment in the city is ready, though I still think As Catherine called, Marcus interrupted, holding up a Patek Philippe watch she had given him for his birthday. After a moment's consideration, he placed it in the keep pile. One of very few items. No, sir, but it's only been 12 hours since the announcement. Marcus nodded, ignoring the tight feeling in his chest. Had chosen a modest one-bedroom apartment in a working-class neighborhood. The kind of place a mid-level tech employee might live. No doorman, no security system, no heated floors or smart home integration. Just 4 walls, basic furnishings, and the truth he so desperately sought. His phone buzzed. Catherine's face lit up the screen, and his heart jumped. But it wasn't a call, just a text. Need some time to process, please understand. 7 words. 7 words that could mean everything or nothing. The move itself was surreal. Marcus watched as movers emptied his penthouse, taking away the trappings of his billionaire lifestyle. He'd kept only what would fit in a modest apartment. A few suits for work, basic furniture, his laptop, and those few precious items that held genuine sentimental value. A photo of his parents. The first dollar he'd ever earned coding. That evening, alone in his new apartment, Marcus stood at a window that faced not the glittering skyline, but a brick wall across a narrow alley. The sounds of the city felt different here, more immediate, less cushioned by privilege. A couple argued in the apartment above. Someone's bass-heavy music thumped through the wall. A siren wailed in the distance. His phone buzzed again. Victor, drinks at the club? We should talk about your situation. Marcus smiled grimly. The club, where membership cost more annually than his new apartments. Yearly rent, sorry, busy, settling in, he typed back. Another text arrived, this one from Catherine. Coffee tomorrow? Our usual place. Their usual place was a high-end cafe where a single latte cost $20. 10 a.m.? The 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. Finally, okay. The next morning, Marcus arrived early at Jackson's. The cafe was nothing special. Worn leather booths, slightly sticky tables, coffee that cost $2 and tasted like it. He chose a booth near the window, ordered a plain coffee, and waited. Catherine arrived precisely at 10, looking somewhat out of place in her designer dress and perfectly styled hair. She hesitated at the door, scanning the dim interior before spotting him. Their eyes met, and for a moment, Marcus saw something flicker across her face. Surprise? Disappointment? Pity? Hi, she said softly, sliding into the booth across from him. She didn't remove her coat. Hi, he replied, studying her face. Thank you for coming. A waitress appeared, tired-looking, middle-aged, her name tag, reading Betty Catherine, ordered a cappuccino. Then winced slightly when Betty mentioned they only had regular or decaf drip coffee. Regular is fine, she said, her smile a bit strained. After Betty left, Catherine turned to Marcus, her eyes searching his face. So, this is really happening? You're really living here, now? A few blocks away, he nodded. It's different, but it feels right. Honest. Honest, her voice, caught on the word, was everything before dishonest. The coffee arrived, served in slightly chipped mugs. Catherine stared at hers but didn't touch it. Marcus watched as she opened her designer purse, probably out of habit reaching for her premium sweetener, then stopped herself. That's not what I meant, Marcus said carefully. I need to know that the connections in my life are real, that people stay because they want to, not because of what I can give them. And you didn't think I was real. There was hurt in her voice, now raw and genuine. 8 months. Preparation for this test? The accusation hung between them, heavy as lead. Outside the cafe's streaked windows, a city bus roared past momentarily, drowning out the classic rock, playing softly over the diner's speakers. Marcus watched as Catherine's perfectly manicured fingers traced the rim of her untouched coffee cup. Every moment with you was real, he said finally. That's why I had to know, had to be sure. Sure of what? Her voice cracked slightly. That I am not a gold digger, that I wouldn't run to Victor the moment your bank account changed. Marcus flinched at Victor's name. Have you? He's called, texted, sent flowers to my office. Catherine's laugh was bitter. Apparently he's very concerned about my well-being now that my boyfriend has lost everything. She made air quotes with her fingers. Relief flooded through Marcus, followed immediately by shame. Here he was secretly testing her loyalty while she was already proving it. Before he could respond, his phone buzzed. A news notification: Chen Industries. Stock drops. 15 following CEO's personal financial announcement. Catherine's phone lit up at the same moment, probably the same alert. Her eyes met his, and for a second, "The board's nervous," he admitted, "but the fundamentals are strong. We'll weather this." She raised an eyebrow. "You still think there's a rift?" "Ooh, after what you've done." Before Marcus could answer, the cafe's bell chimed. Victor Sterling walked in, looking absurdly out of place in his three-piece suit and Italian leather shoes. His smile was predatory as he approached their booth. "Well, isn't this cozy?" Victor's voice dripped with false warmth. "Catherine, darling, I've been trying to reach you in Marcus. Loving the new neighborhood, very authentic." Marcus felt his jaw clench, but Catherine spoke first. "We're in the middle of something, Victor." "Oh, I can see that." Victor pulled up a chair anyway. "Uninvited, just thought I'd check on you both. Especially after this morning's market performance." He turned to Catherine. "You know my offer still stands. The company could use someone with your talents in PR, especially now that you might be reconsidering your option." Marcus watched Catherine's face, his heart pounding. This was it, the first real test. Victor was offering her an escape route back to the world of luxury she'd known with Marcus, back to expensive coffees and designer clothes and... "I have a job, Victor." Catherine's voice was ice. "And I don't appreciate what you're implying about my relationship." "Your relationship?" Victor laughed. "Darling, look around you. Look at this place. This is Marcus' reality. Get out." Catherine's voice was quiet but firm. Both men stared at her. "I said, get out, Victor, now." Victor's smile faltered for the first time. He stood slowly, straightening his jacket. "You know where to find me when you come to your senses." He paused, then added with a smirk, "Both of you." After he left, silence fell between Marcus and Catherine. She still hadn't touched her coffee, now surely cold. Finally, she spoke. "I don't know if I can forgive you for this deception." Marcus, her voice was soft hurt. "But I do know that I'm not the person Victor thinks I am. I'm not the person you apparently thought I was either." She stood, gathering her purse. "I need more time to think, to process, but know this. It'll be because you lost your trust in me before you ever gave me a chance to prove myself worthy of it." Marcus watched her walk out of the cafe, her designer heels clicking against the linoleum floor. Through the window, he saw her pass her car, a luxury SUV he'd helped her choose, and instead head for the bus stop. She sat on the bench, pulling her coat tighter against the morning chill, looking simultaneously out of place and somehow more real than he'd ever seen her. His phone buzzed again. "James, sir. The board is requesting an emergency meeting. And there's something else you should know. Mr. Sterling has been making some interesting moves with company shares." The next 2 weeks passed in a blur of board meetings and damage control. Marcus watched from his modest apartment as Victor orchestrated a sophisticated attack on Chen Industries, leveraging the uncertainty created by Marcus's financial collapse to attempt a hostile takeover. The irony wasn't lost on him. His test of love had inadvertently put everything he built at risk. Catherine remained distant, but didn't completely disappear. She'd send occasional texts, usually simple check-ins that felt more like courtesy than connection. Each time his phone buzzed, Marcus found himself hoping for more, even as guilt gnawed at his conscience. It was a rainy Tuesday evening when everything began to unravel. Marcus sat at his small kitchen table, reviewing company documents on his laptop, when a knock at the door startled him. Through the peephole, he saw Catherine, soaking wet and looking uncharacteristically disheveled. "I know," she said the moment he opened the door. Her voice was steady, but her hands shook. "I know everything, Marcus." His heart stopped. "What do you mean?" She pushed past him into the apartment, water dripping from her coat onto the worn carpet. In her hand was a thick manila envelope, the Chen Foundation's new charitable trust. "The one that supposedly has 90% of your wealth. It doesn't exist." Marcus felt the blood drain from his face. "How did you?" "Victor," she cut him off, "pulling documents from the envelope. He's been investigating you, looking for weaknesses to exploit for his takeover." He found something else. Instead, she spread the papers on his table, covering his laptop. There was no massive charitable donation. No catastrophic investment losses. You still own everything, don't you? This whole thing, the move, the lifestyle change, the supposed poverty, it's all been a lie. Marcus stood frozen, watching as water from her hair dripped onto the documents. Documents that proved his deception. Catherine, I can explain. Explain what her voice rose slightly. Explain how you orchestrated this elaborate scheme to test my love. How you manipulated not just me, but your entire company. Do you have any idea what this could do to Chen Industries if it gets out? To all the people who depend on you for their livelihoods? She was right, of course. The revelation that he had fabricated financial hardship could destroy market confidence in Chen Industries far more thoroughly than actual financial problems would have. Victor's planning to expose everything at tomorrow's shareholders' meeting. Catherine continued, her voice softening slightly. He came to me first thinking that I'd help him destroy you. Marcus felt sick. And do you? Catherine looked around the small apartment, at the second-hand furniture, the bare walls, the simple life he'd been playing at living. You know what's funny? These past 2 weeks watching you live here, take the bus, drink cheap coffee, I actually started to fall more in love with you, because despite everything else changing, you stayed the same person. Kind, hardworking, real, she laughed bitterly. Except it wasn't real at all, was it? My feelings for you were real, Marcus. Step toward her are real. The only thing I lied about was the money. The only thing. She shook her head. You lied about trusting me, about believing in us. You took away my chance to prove myself worthy of your love by trying to trick me into proving it instead. Lightning flashed outside, illuminating tears on her cheeks that mixed with the rainwater. I didn't come here to hurt you, Marcus. I came to warn you. Victor has proof of everything. The fake trust, the manufactured financial records, all of it. He's going to use it to take control of your company. Unless what? Unless you voluntarily step down as CEO and give him controlling interest in Chen Industries. Catherine's voice was barely a whisper. Now he's giving you until morning to decide. The silence that followed was deafening. Rain pelted against the windows of the small apartment, creating shadows that danced across Catherine's face. Marcus sank into a chair, the weight of his decisions finally catching up to him. I was so focused on testing everyone else's truth, he said finally, that I lost sight of my own. Catherine remained standing, her coat still dripping onto the floor. What are you going to do? Marcus looked up at her, really looked at her. She'd come here in the rain, knowing the truth about his deception, not to join Victor's revenge, but to warn him. Even now, hurt and betrayed, she was choosing to be the better person. The right thing, he said, standing suddenly. Finally, he pulled out his phone and dialed James. Call an emergency board meeting. First thing tomorrow before the shareholders meeting. And thank you for everything. He turned to Catherine. I won't let Victor take the company. Not like this tomorrow morning. I'm going to tell the board everything myself, the whole truth. That could destroy everything you've built, she said softly. Maybe, but living this lie, it's already destroying everything that matters. He took a deep breath. I owe you the whole truth. Catherine sat down at the small kitchen table, her designer dress wrinkled and damp, makeup slightly smudged from the rain. The night we met, he began at that charity auction. I'd already decided to do this test. I was going to choose someone, anyone, and see if they could love me without my wealth. But then I met you, and you were so real, so genuine. I fell in love with you before I could stop myself. So you decided to test me anyway? The hurt in her voice was palpable. I decided to test myself, he corrected, because I was terrified that someone like you, someone so authentic, so true to themselves, could never really love someone like me, someone who'd hidden behind wealth for so long that he'd forgotten who he really was. Lightning flashed again, closer now. In the brief illumination, Marcus saw tears rolling down Catherine's cheeks. These past 2 weeks, he continued, living here, being stripped of everything. I wasn't just testing you. I was finding myself, and you're right. I stayed the same person because maybe finally I was being the person I really am. Catherine stood abruptly, walking to the window. Do you know what I did last week? After our coffee shop meeting, she didn't wait for his answer. I sold my car, the one you helped me choose. I took the money and started a small scholarship fund for underprivileged kids interested in tech. Because even though I thought you'd lost everything, you were still trying to help others. You inspired me. Marcus felt his heart constrict Catherine. She turned to face him. I don't know if I can trust you again, but I do know this. The man I fell in love with isn't the billionaire or the fake pauper. As the person who's been there all along, under all the pretense, the question is, do you trust that person enough to let him be real? The next morning dawned clear and cold. Marcus stood before the board of directors, Catherine silent but present in the back of the room. Before we begin, Marcus said, his voice steady, I have a confession to make. But before he could continue, Catherine stepped forward. Actually, we have an announcement to make. She placed a USB drive on the table over the past 2 weeks. While Mr. Sterling was investigating Marcus, I was investigating him. This drive contains proof of insider trading, corporate espionage, and several other illegal activities Mr. Sterling has been engaging in while planning his hostile takeover. Victor's smile vanished. You're bluffing. And my Catherine's voice was steel. I may not be a billionaire, Victor, but I am very, very good at my job in PR. Part of that job is knowing where to look for secrets and when to use them. The room erupted into chaos as security escorted a protesting Victor out. Catherine turned to Marcus. I told you I needed time to think, and I decided that trust isn't about testing someone's loyalty. It's about being worthy of it. Later that day, as the sun set over the city, Marcus stood in his modest apartment one last time. Catherine sat on the worn couch, watching him. So she said, what now? Marcus smiled, pulling out a folder, the real Chen Foundation documents. Now we do what I should have done from the beginning. We use our resources to help others together. No tests, no deception, just truth. And us? That depends, he said softly. The penthouse is sold. The fancy cars, the private jets, all gone for real this time. To remind me of what matters. Catherine stood walking to him. Good, she said, because I'm starting to like cheap coffee. As they stood together at the window, watching the city lights come on one by one, Marcus realized that sometimes the greatest wealth isn't what you have. It's what you're willing to risk losing for what truly matters.